get my thing on here. Whoops. Share screen. Mute yourself there, Dapper, while we start up the show. And I want to share
I think
screen.
he's away from the computer.
That's very possible. Anyway, we'll get our thing going here. Little clickety-clack. Off we go with the magic light bulb. Welcome to Evolution Hour. Jackson and Dapper Dino are here. There goes all the logos for Troubles in Paradise, tartucanwordpress.com. Hint, hint. I have a damn website, Troubles in Paradise Project. Everybody can make use of that. Welcome to the show, and that takes care of our opening bit. So we'll find out whether or not chat rescreen could not be found, so I don't see any of the live chat. So if anybody else has access to that, they can be. Let me put up our.
Is the live chat real, RJ?
No. Yep, we're not getting anything on the reach.
No.
We're not getting anything on the retreat. All of our live stream chat are simulations.
I see somebody.
How about that?
I see Scott Duke.
Well, yeah. Okay, well, you can relay the information because I'm not seeing it at all on my end of it. So you can, if anybody brings up a question or comment, you can relay it as our font and our conduit of truth. Anyway, starting off, and with the wonderful world of replacing Darwin, we're into chapter 7. Chapter 6 was kind of a fizzle out, basically repeats his little 12,000 year mantra. He said, don't worry, you shouldn't really be able to easily detect the speciation burst, because if you take the species that you can calculate for existing species within certain groups and divide by 12,000, it's only going to turn out to like maybe one species every other year-ish. But the problem is that 12,000 is wrong. Oh, we've got another guest, I think. Here. But Maddie.
Oh, hello,
there
Maddie.
you go.
Hey, I promise I'd come back.
Yes, indeed. And Jackson is here. We have Dapper Diner and all Dapper.
Yes, I am the most dapper of all diners.
I like it. Honestly,
fanciest diner in the world.
Anyway, we're going to be raking that over the coals, and then in part 2 is going to be a relation to Otangelo Grasso and his amazing comments on speciation, which he has obtained by vacuuming up the viewpoints of people who don't know what they're talking about.
Shocker.
I feel like I may use sarcastically in this context.
Yeah, that's Otangelo.
I'm frequently amazed by Otangelo, legitimately.
As to what he manages to come up with. Let me start right off the bat to thank our patrons, just in case we lose a stream count and all that. We want to make sure all that's in there. Our colleagues Hendro, Colton, Eric Riley, Suris, and Zeshi, researchers Travis Adams, Ian Chen, Convert Me, Stephen Early, Ethan Neal, James Fitzwater, History Minor, Ralph McFadden, Pelagia, Benjamin Simpson, Speed of Sound, assistant researchers, new Command Cyborg has joined Duranku.
Welcome, Command Cyborg.
Totus Real and Christopher Johnson, friends Daniel, Steve Bauman, Marigail Beddoes, Insects Cool, Devin Reeves, Morton Nielsen, Paul Skeptic, Paulophagus, Bo Rasmussen, Alex Stone, and Paul Williams, and of course, not forgetting the legacy patrons who were able to help at one point or another: Dan and Jody, Mike, John, Keith, Andrew, Dyer, Yui, Mona, Brad, Daniel, Nanya, Staggles, Sun Sky Stone, Ugly German Truths, Everett, and Sewer. You are all much appreciated and of great help. So now to the exciting stuff. Dear old Jeanson. So his chapter 6 fizzled out with this repetition of that 12,000 mantra, which we know is roughly an order of magnitude off from what he's actually proposing, which is a gigantic amount of speciation taking place in the 1,000 years or so after the flood, where the archetypes are proliferating. But he isn't willing to come clean and put that out as an actual model. So he starts out then on chapter 7, where he notes ever so casually that some of the content of this chapter involves his prior work, and sticks in a footnote a slew of stuff that he did in his creationist guise, and along with a thing he did with Jason Lyle in 2016. So I'll be putting the links to all of those ones on recent functionally diverse origin for mitochondrial genes, and the DNA clocks, linear speciation rates, and mitochondrial genome mutation rate, and the human mitochondrial DNA differences, and then the one they did with Lyle is on the origin of eukaryotic species, genotype, and phenotypic diversity. Well,
I can't imagine that Lyle had anything to add to any of that.
Lyle.
Yeah, astrophysicist.
Yeah, Lyle, our
was
famous
really
biologist.
Gosh. They always do crap like that, and I do not get it.
Yeah. Anyway, every
Well,
single instance
in fairness,
of Jeanson putting in his creationist material has been in a footnote. So he doesn't come out and say it right up front. He just says prior work, footnote, creationism, which is very, very interesting. Anyway, anybody that feels like zinging through a lot of that can go through it, but I will be connecting up with one specific example that he launches off on, and also alluding to Evograd, who has one of the longest sections of his takedown of Jeanson relates to this chapter 7. And this is bringing up the pesky little issue of the fact that Jeanson is confusing functionality and morphology. He's using pedigree versus somatic mutation rates, which Dan Stern Cardinale and others have called attention to, which is wrong. It's interesting that one of the papers that Jeanson had misrepresented in other contexts, but so far hasn't cited in this new book, was the 2015 paper by Ding on mitochondrial DNA variation that has been pointed out how Jeanson had misrepresented its source material. And I think David Neff had actually contacted Ding personally to confirm that he was not using somatic mutation rates in this area. And so that this was all completely irrelevant to the kind of claims that Jeanson was trying to do. So I'll be putting all the links into Evograd and the Ding paper and others. But there's one particular paper that came up.
a Ding paper.
Where the Ding paper. This is Conrad 2011. Jeanson cites a pile of papers on observed mutation rates in various organisms. So he just lists off organisms and he's got footnote. The first one right off the bat is a 2011 paper by Conrad from Nature Genetics on variation rates within and between families. And it had explicitly noted in that paper, quote, and I'm going to be putting that quote in the description, averaging across these 4 studies gave a more precise sex average mutation rate of 1.18 times 10 to the minus 8, which is less than half of the frequently cited sex average mutation rate derived from the human chimpanzee sequence divergence of 2.5 million years. These apparently discordant estimates can be largely reconciled if the age of the human chimpanzee divergence is pushed back to 7 million years, as suggested by some interpretations of recent fossil finds. And he cites Chen and Lee's 2001 paper that I'll be putting a link up to. And by considering more recent and slightly lower robust genome-wide estimates of sequence divergence, citing a 2010 paper by Lynch that I had not previously been aware of, and unfortunately wasn't available in open access content, but you'll be able to find the reference of it by looking up the Conrad paper. And so it's kind of an annoying but consistent pattern with Jeanson that he alludes to science material that contains relevant information and positions that conflict wildly with his argument, and that somehow and always he never discusses it.
Well, you know.
Well, I mean, if he discussed it, he would have to admit he's wrong, right?
Yeah, that would be one thing there.
Yeah.
So I was mentioning to Maddie before we started up the show that I've been doing spreadsheet analysis of the work. And what is distinctive about him, first of all, he's still maintaining his average of roughly 1 citation per page, which is not exactly a gangbusters thing for a technical work.
Yeah,
And
just for a bit of reference.
That would have been unacceptable undergrad. Sorry.
Yeah, for reference, I'm writing a paper for a class project right now, and I'm averaging 2 citations a sentence.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
And so that was around the same, it's slightly below the average that Roop and Sanford were doing. But then again, they were pathological quote miners in a way that Jeanson hasn't been. They're both Rupert and Sanford and Jeanson are averaging about 40% of their citation field are technical literature. And where Jenson's different in that he's virtually never citing anything for quotes. So he's not doing any quote mining at all. Instead, he's just dangling these little blips. And by my measurement, and this Conrad paper would be an example of that, over a third of his technical citations, I contend he's misrepresented in that he's been suppressing or neglecting to mention the contrary information that's in it. Now, I would argue that to do that even once or twice with a technical argument that you are citing is not a good thing. But to do it over a third of the time is like a bad pattern.
Yeah, that sounds like
Pitter
a
patter.
great way for. We'll just keep referencing my class paper. That sounds like a great way for me to fail.
Yeah. And so is there any great surprise that in the genetic community, Jenson's arguments are not carrying great weight?
Or any weight.
Yeah,
who would pay attention to him, really?
Yeah, I'm keeping kind of a stack of material relating to the mutation rate issue, some of which that's going to be coming up in relation to human evolution. See, I'm prepping ahead for the second volume of the rocks were there. But I've also been keeping track of just things in relation to that mutation issue that we might want to have a little info box where we're discussing how creationists have this very strange notion about what mutations are, from the extremes to where they're if you look at grassroots creationists, particularly older ones, they actually seriously imagine that every mutation is deleterious, and that if evolution were true, the fossil record should just be just a glut of deformed mutants that are mutating and then getting preserved in the fossil record and failing to turn into new forms and all of that, all the failures.
There was actually a paper on a two-headed lizard that was earlier this year, I think. But that was kind of neat. Lizard? Yes, a fossil two-headed lizard.
Gee.
Yep, there's a mutation.
You get a little bit of examples of cancers and other deformities in fossil data. Relatively rare for that to become because very few fossils are of a detail, but some of the ones that do produce morphological things that are visible with the bones, you have a chance of finding occasionally examples of that, which of course brings up the interesting question: weren't organisms supposed to be perfect before the flood? Was there supposed to be any diseases? And
RJ, you're asking for like actual specificity and an actual model that makes predictions. We all know that actually is going to happen. It's just a whole bunch of fogginess and like, things are before or after the flood, depending when they want. Things are perfect when they need them to be. They're not when they don't need them to be. It's all just kind of wishy-washy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's why in the rocks were there, we've taken to describing the creationist position as a cartoon version. That it's not a detailed, meticulous model, and it's going to really kick in relation to their paleo environments that they imagine were taking place during the flood and after the flood. That at this point, you really want to have specificity, and if their model was correct, they would be able to work out in great detail that in this spot was this bunch of critters, and over here was this, and then the ice age was coming down, and the things and the fountains of the deep were coming up over there and sloshing over here, and we can find signs of the water coming at this rate and all that. If their model was correct, they would be able to get to that level of detail, and why haven't they pulled that off? In some of the material that I've been culling through, which we'll be alluding to in the second book, we've got creationist material that's going back to the 1960s. And you can see this constant promissory note of Bergman and others coming out in like 2008 and telling us the new flood geology model that we're working out is going to be an enormous thing, and we're going to be developing all of this new stuff. And now I'm looking at it from a dozen years later, and I'm going, oh, really?
How did that work out?
Yeah. This is that long sense of history is an element that because I'm already an old fart and I'm familiar with stuff going back a long ways, whereas too many of the people that are coming into the media today and think that Nephilim free and standing for truth are like the cutting edge, they're just reflecting a tiny little narrow window of apologetics, and they don't have any idea about the whole long time frame. Another issue, of course, is the how many kinds are there, and just how fast is speciation rates and all that. Now, Jeanson's supposedly going to pin all of this stuff down in the remaining chapters. Chapter 7 is really big, and then chapter 10, he's also coming back to it. It's a mess of a disorganized book because he's constantly bringing up a topic and then dropping it and then hoping that you don't notice that when he brings it up again. He's mentioned like horses 3 or 4 times in the book, never at great depth. He just in this the tail end of chapter 6, he brings up quaggas and zebras and all that again, and he has never dealt with the fossil record of the horse sequence. He kind of implies that maybe it's all speciation within a kind, but that's as far as he goes with it. So anybody that dives into creationism should always keep their little antennas up to look for what's not there, which is their detailed model of what they think happened. So when did it happen? What happened next? And then what happened next? Try to put those in your spreadsheet as what the answers are, and you're going to discover over and over again they aren't doing that.
Exactly.
That there's an anti argument. Well, it can't be Darwinism, and yet we've got. By the way, Maddie, Jeanson is in the last couple of weeks. I called attention to the fact that Jeanson latched on to a paper that was arguing about the domestication of animals and plants by humans over the last 12,000 years. Mm-hmm. And he then turns that into an argument that they were arguing, or that he can argue, that all the current species came into existence, at least within the last 12,000 years.
Well, and he is an astrophysicist, so, 6,000...
Oh, no, not Jeanson. No, Jenson's a geneticist.
He's a geneticist?
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was going to make a terrible astrophysicist.
No, Jason Lyle is the astrophysicist.
I was going to make a terrible joke about astrophysicists being bad with orders of magnitude. Like, 2 pi, let's just call it 10. It's fine.
I wanted to point out earlier, Jason Lyle earlier, Paul Davies is a physicist, and he said that cancer was an atavism. Was like our cells reverting back to bacteria. So
there's always this syndrome of distinguished or not distinguished, elderly or not, scientists in one field venturing with great bravado into areas about which they actually know absolutely nothing.
It's very important to stay in your swim lane, right? Because in your swim lane you can be the best, but if you get out of your swim lane, boy howdy, do you not know what you're talking about? And
Jeanson, Sanford, Tompkins, and all the various geneticists, Carter and others that populate, and Georgia Purdom, YEC land, demonstrate that no, they are not very prominent in their lane, let alone outside of it.
And they're kicking all over everybody else's lane. Yeah.
You might the cosmology chapter for the new book, which is going to be riffing off a lot of Jason Lyle. And its title is Twinkle, Twinkle, Lyle Stars.
I like
it. Yeah, that's going to be a funky one, because what's interesting about that cosmological argument is, of course, that the Big Bang separates young Earth creationists from their other creationists. Because the intelligent design gang and the old Earth creationists just love the Big Bang. There was the creation ex nihilo. We got God making let there be light, let there be electromagnetic radiation. There it all fits perfectly if we don't look too closely. It's absolutely wonderful. Whereas the young Earth creationists are still digging in their heels and trying to figure out how to have the whole universe expanding in the space of like an hour or two after the creation of the universe 6,000 years ago, and then the light waves, there's the speed of lights varying, and then we have accelerated radioactive decay, and then we've got the Hovian theory, which is a giant snowballs from space slam down onto the Earth and flash freeze mammoths in place.
Super cold comets come down from space. Never mind about the actual energy involved in such an event, which would not freeze the mammoths, but would vaporize them.
Yeah, apparently they haven't worked out what happens when impact events occur inside of an atmosphere.
Look, potential energy is for other people, not for Kent Hovind.
Yeah, well, candy is potentially something, but energy is not one of them. I did debate Kent Hovind some years back, and he has never come back for a rematch. I suppose because he imagines he completely.
Same. Whoa!
I just got an email. We might be rescheduled for tomorrow on the prerequisite that there's a tech pre-call with Modern Day Debate and Kent's people.
Well, I think he didn't take kindly to the fact that I called Kent a bottom feeder. And so he was in the end of it. He was fuming that I was what did he call the altar boy for atheism? I think
he called you an altar boy. That's right. He said he would buy your next candle. Did you take him up on that?
Yeah,
you could have gotten a free candle out of the deal.
Indeed, I've gone to the little electric candles rather than little battery operated ones. Voted.
Look, for real altar boy cred, what you really need is a beeswax candle because they smell amazing.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever bumped into that. You know, I don't think I've ever actually been in a Catholic church in the functioning Catholic church mode. So
modern Catholic churches, when it comes to candles, are lame. They just use paraffin and it's boring. Go to a very traditional, like a very traditional old school Greek or Russian Orthodox church, because they're going to have the beeswax candles. Trust me on this.
Welcome to the History of Candles show.
RJ, you have no room to talk whatsoever. You have no room to talk.
Absolutely. I plead totally guilty to be able to geek out. If you want to see ultimate geekism when Colton and I start going on about the Titanic, the room flees.
I've been there for that.
Yeah, I've been there for that too. Ugh.
We're both ocean liner things. Now, the part 2 of the show relates to our little old pal Otangelo Grasso and his notions. Yes, is he in the live chat, by the way?
Oh, Riley Rose isn't familiar with Science Side Up.
That's okay. I introduced myself in chat. Hi, I'm Maddie.
Yes.
Yeah, she's cool. She does a lot of meteorology stuff, climate science, and stuff like that, and also some creationism debunking. And she was teaching nuclear power at the same place that I went to learn nuclear power.
Have we ever figured out if we weren't there at the same time, right?
No, not even close.
Okay.
Not even close. I was there long before you got there.
Yeah, what's interesting is that you've got paleoclimate work just within the last 20 years, I would say. It's reached the stage where now you're getting very detailed technical papers on paleoclimates because you can work out where mountain ranges are and therefore plug them into the models and figure out where the monsoons were taking place and then find out that that's making sense as to why the foraminifera that are in the ocean have the temperature range that they do because of all. And so they're able to work this out on a level. Plus, it's a way of testing out current climate models to see how well they're dealing with the dynamics of the past. This is so far removed from anything happening in the creationism world.
I know, it's so cool. Actually, not to just be a shameless plug, but
go ahead.
My last on Sunday, every Sunday I release a about 10-minute long explainer kind of lecture style video. And we've been doing climate dynamics for lots and lots and lots of weeks, and then we just started doing some paleoclimate stuff. So if you want to learn a little bit about what paleoclimate is and to sort of how people figure out what the temperature was like 200 million years ago, I've got one video up, and that's going to be the topic for the next few weeks.
It's pure science Sherlock Holmes.
It's so cool.
It's the pieces from this and that and multidisciplinary. That's another thing that just as Evo Devo draws in biology and developmental biology and genetics and all of that, this paleoclimate stuff is connecting up geology and climate systems and ecology. There's all these different interconnected things, and it's just neat stuff.
It's nifty. It's very fun.
So interesting compared to the cartoon twaddle that you get over in Creation Science Land. It's just or the nothing that you get over in. I'll give tiny props to the Creation Science movement. They try to make sense of some of these data fields because they're forced into it because the flood. So they have to think through this issue of how many kinds there were and why are there coal seams here and why are there this over there and not over there. They've got to worry about it. Whereas the moment you move over into old Earth creationism and intelligent design, well, they're just not going to worry their pretty little heads over that. They don't have to bother about that at all. Yes, there's hundreds of millions of years, and please don't ask me about any of it. I'm not going to tell you about anything that happened. I'm not going to describe anything that happened, and boop, it just disappears. And you can test this out. You know, try to figure out one of the questions that I wanted Dan Stern Cardinale to ask Michael Behe when he was on, but they had their own conversations. Jackson's back. Excellent. Would have been.
Will I ever truly leave?
How many design events were there during the Mesozoic? And you will never get an answer to that from an intelligent design perspective because it would mean they would have to figure out what their model is.
Yeah.
One weird common thread between young Earth creationism and flat Earth is a sort of incredulity towards models, right? This is like, oh, you believe a computer model? Like this one that's been hundreds of scientists have spent their entire careers on developing for the last 30 years. I put a lot of that's been rigorously tested throughout the community.
Historically, although there are exceptions, the majority of flat earthers are hyper-conservative, Bible-believing, geocentric creationists.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're and this has been true for a very long time. I have a relative who is very religious who just bristles when I remind him that the flat earth cosmology was the cosmology of the Bible and that the flat earthers today are drawing off of that tradition. And he don't like that idea.
Yeah, well, it turns out even the Bible isn't a very good science textbook.
No, and they didn't have anything at all about positrons.
No.
Yeah, and it was an entirely human document. It makes perfect sense and a not unreasonable one. Even the one about the fact that they don't have the sun and the moon and the stars being made until day 4, that you could easily disconnect the idea that the reason why there's light outside has to do with that big ball of fire, because dawn comes before the sun comes up. They don't know about how refraction works in the atmosphere. They don't have any connection with anybody that knows about that. So they can easily get the wrong attitude on it. And so a lot of these flat earth concepts, you can walk all over the place and the earth seems really flat. And so a lot of these things are perfectly reasonable ideas given the state of knowledge at the time. Geocentrism was a notion that to this day, flat earthers are obsessed about. They can't quite get a grip on what inertia means.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things that I've heard from a flat earther, I heard in my debate that I did recently. It was a 3-on-3, and one of the people there was a flat Earth Aussie. He's gone by Flat Aussie Jesus. I think he's now going by Flat Earthers Aussie Roscoe. I don't know. He changes his handle every once in a while. But anyway, he said, the globe earthers are always asking us for a model, but a model only works at full scale, so we can't build one. And I'm just like, I'm thinking to myself, that is not at all what anyone means. No one wants you to build a little object that looks like the flat Earth. And no one gives a crap about that.
Right. I just want to know how you get density of the atmosphere decreasing with height if you're in a pressurized system. That's what I want to know. Just that. Just explain that one thing. Just one thing.
Yeah, the other one has to do with the non-existent flat Earth ephemeris, which will be able to predictively locate what where positions would be for stars and planets at any given time within their completely consistent frame, having everything so much closer. And none of them have ever gotten that. But if you just imagine the average flat earther doing a YouTube, doing that level of like Ptolemy detail for their book, that's not what you're gonna get. No, it's way too easy to get on there and show a picture of a blurry Chicago across the lake and say, aha, this shows that something is going on. And that's about as far as it gets there. Anyway, back, I know you've been using this as an ingenious distraction to avoid bringing up Otangelo and speciation, but it's not going to work.
Fair enough.
Yeah, we got the thing. Anyway, let me summarize what the mess is in here.
7.
Normally, Otangelo is an origins or bust obsessive. And 99.999% of the time when you interact with him, which people do to their peril, you get a pile of authority quotes going on and on and on and on about origin of life issues. And that's most of his oeuvre. But he did lob a link, and we'll be putting it in there, from Reason and Science, catsboard.com, on evolution, speciation, primary and secondary speciation, in which he dives off the diving board into the empty pool by functionally denying that speciation happens at all. And he spends most of his time in this extraordinary tome on hybridizing speciation issues, which he insists, quote, secondary speciation at the genus level is possible, but at the family level and beyond is not. Organisms can evolve only up to different genera, but not different families, unquote.
Arbitrary.
Arbitrary. What's a family?
Yeah.
That is my biggest question for all these creationists who want to cut it off speciation at the family level. What the heck is a family? Because there's literally no definition other than a group of similar genera. Exactly. Okay.
Now, he goes on, he authority quotes Alan Linton about the lack of speciation, which turns out to be in a review of Niles Eldridge's anti-creationism book, which the quoters avoid mentioning altogether. So it's a secondary reference to anti-creationism. So it's a long daisy chain. Otangelo also drew on Jonathan Wells's 2009 posting on selection and speciation, which I'll be putting the link to.
Relevant.
Yeah, and Jonathan Wells, of course, is a sure source of authority. Yeah,
he is the world expert on speciation. Wait, no, he's not. He has no qualifications in this area.
And the same quote popped up in Explore Evolution, which NCA, National Center for Science Education, noted. I'll be putting in the reference on that. So this is a pure recycling authority quote relating to other issues where it shouldn't. And it's Linton, by the way. Otangelo may not know this, but Linton is actually associated with the Biblical Creation Society and is also a signatory of the Discovery Institute's Descent from Darwin list. So he has his own little axes to grind. He's not as though his criticism of Eldridge's criticism of creationism came out of the blue as a purely scientific critique in this little letter that's being quoted. And then also it pops up in Brian Thomas's 2010 piece at ICR, No Fruit Fly Evolution Even After 600 Generations, that was also taking lobs at Linton's bacteria studies.
I mean, the thing about bacteria is, what the heck is a species of bacteria? Yeah. If you have a lineage that does a separate set of metabolic processes, is it a new species? Maybe. Yeah. Maybe not. What does it mean to be a species? They don't interbreed with anything else. So
I put in
splitting and going off.
I'll be putting in a reference about the fruit fly example that Otangelo veered around in relation to Douglas Futuma. That would reflect sympatric speciation that's much rarer in animals. And Futuma's chapter on speciation, which poor old secondary quote miner Otangelo was kind of flirting past, I'd made quite clear about. And I found one little relevant paper was a cat blank from 2020 on the hybrid contacts of two alpine butterfly species that diverged from 12,000 to 20,000 years ago, which, by the way, were already off the scope for the age of the Earth in Otangelo's framework on that one. And then a reminder of how complex a species can get, corals and their symbionts. And there's a new paper by Forsman that I'm putting up from Nature that's open access, or not open access, but there's a commentary on it at his org that goes into the details on it, so you'll be able to get the gist on it. And the thing is that why is it that if the creation model of speciation or kinds is so immensely powerful, it's so difficult to get them to apply it to the actual critters in such a way that it persuades anybody outside of their little niche?
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things about creationism in general. It's vanishingly rare to find someone who comes to the evidence, decides to be a young Earth creationist, and then maybe converts to Christianity. It's essentially universally anyone who stops being a non-creationist, I suppose, starts out being not religious, then they become religious, and then they suddenly realize, oh, hey, if I think such and such and such about the data, which I never would before, then it makes it easier for me to reconcile my particular theology with reality.
Plus, there's an apologetic approach in particularly evangelical creationism of the ex-creationist, ex-evolutionist. I used to be an evolutionist, but then I saw the light, and now I see that all of this stuff is completely wrong. And here I'm going to quote a mass of stuff that I culled from Dwayne Gish to verify that what I just said is true, even though I'm never going to fact check any of it. And you get that. But what you see then, that same process takes place generation on generation. So now you have somebody from the Standing for Truth era who's too young to really have bumped into much Dwayne Gish. Instead, he's riffing off of Jeanson and Sanford and Tompkins and all the rest, slavishly copying the latest blips in their perpetual obliteration of the field. But the point is, you still have to deal with the data. And the thing that Otangelo, this was why I found this whole posting of Otangelo so hilarious, is the one thing that he has to be very careful about in creationism is to try to limit speciation, because the modern creationist model requires gangbuster on steroids, hyperspeciation, full speed ahead, to pull off the brakes, get the rockets going. Speciation. and poor Otangelo is too far removed from any of the data field. It's revealing that none of them are zoologists, that you find some technical geneticists, a lot of biochemists, and then, of course, the dilettantes, the astrophysicist that comes in and does the genetics paper with Jeanson, that they're really out of their field. But then if you look at somebody, you get very specialized people. There are some that are like insect people or flower groupies or particular niche groups that will be creationists, and they'll tunnel vision. But usually an awful lot of their apologetics is gee whiz stuff. Look at how complicated the hummingbird beak is. And that's about as far as it goes.
I have a whole rant about irreducible complexity.
As well, you should.
Is it in the video of yours yet? Because it should be.
It's not in a video of mine yet.
Do it.
Yeah,
I mean, but I have to make a Jackson exposed video, so you should make this video.
Yeah, my rant is rooted in, do you know how complicated a tornado is? If you think an eye is complicated, please look at the structure of a tornado.
I like to point out about the fact that to this day, we don't know how lightning is formed in a thundercloud.
That's true. I've got a friend who her entire PhD, her whole career is in just lightning, right? The physics of lightning is a whole
They know it's electrical. Benjamin Franklin knew that. We got that settled. We can tell you how powerful a lightning bolt is. But how do those positive and negative segregate in the cloud in such a way that they can produce a differential to the ground? It says something maybe to do with dust particles and things, but then even in supercomputers, it starts breaking down. They really can't figure this one out. Does this mean it's Zeus?
Have we looked into electromagnetic waves?
It's definitely related to ice. Ice is super important for making lightning. But yeah, it's incredibly complicated. And the physics processes that happen, like, so if you think about numerical weather models, I could talk about numerical weather models, the horizontal resolution, right? There's no model that's fine enough that can model a thunderstorm and pick up this single piece of hail is charged in this way.
Plus, since climate and weather is a nonlinear system, there are natural limits to any heuristic you do where you would theoretically have to be perfect. And an approximation will immediately produce a fog.
Approximation produces fog, and that's even an approximation on the order of rounding errors of your computer, right?
Regarding the irreducible complexity topic, may I shamelessly plug chapter 4 of my work at my tip website, www.tortukan.wordpress.com, Creationism Light, where I went into the intelligent design movement and I analyzed all 5 of the supposedly irreducibly complex examples that Michael Behe put forward in his 1996 book. And when you burrowed way beneath the footnotes, you discover that every single one of them had caveats that he didn't put up front as to how we didn't know about this and they didn't know about this and they only had a model of that. Whereas he was proceeding as if, we've worked out everything with these so detailed that we can utterly rule out a naturalistic origin for any of the components.
I call shenanigans.
Yes, shenanigans. I've heard someone else say that. I can't remember. Oh, that's what it was. South Park. Shenanigans. That was South Park.
Well, I feel like there's someone who called shenanigans on you recently several times.
You know what, Dapper? I got some shenanigans for you. But okay. Now I was gonna remember. I remember now because you almost got me. You almost made me forget it. The Muslim guy who I debated recently, finding truth.
Ahmed.
He took away one thing from our debate regarding the eye, and it was that the fossil record does not show the evolution of the compound eye. So he made a whole video talking about how the compound eye is irreducibly complex. So
I am not surprised.
I did not watch it. I saw that it was up there, and I was like, "Yikes!"
Well, actually, there's been a surprising amount of analysis, even of trilobite eyes, which are tricky to deal with because there ain't no trilobites around to look at alive. So it all has to be done from fossils. But apparently, I think manganese or magnesium, one of those M elements, plays a role in the crystallization formations that play a role in those arthropod eyes that are seen in the trilobites. And the super duper schizochroial ones that are praised by creationists so often. I have a section on that, I believe, in that same chapter 4 on that irreducible complexity thing and eyeball stuff.
Is that by any chance? Dapper will know this term. Watch Team Backup. Is that link in your description?
I always put my website up in the main description. So yeah, the www.tortukan.wordpress.com. All the PDFs that are there are open access. Everybody can share them, write all of the thing. The Dynamania chapter on creation science, the human evolution chapter 1, all that stuff. Go ahead and spread it around. There's a one book length one that's just on 3 macroevolutionary episodes. An awful lot of that material, of course, we've been recycling and buffing up and improving for Rocks Were There and Evolution Slam Dunk, and eventually Rocks Were There Volume 2. And if you want the fiction, I'll shameless plug the Paralogs of Phileas Fogg up there, which I'm, again, nearing completion on the 2nd volume of that little puppy. So I'm allegedly a retiree. I'm actually
you don't seem to be very good at it.
Yes, I keep very busy, and it's a very agile puzzle to deal with. But there's so much stupid in creationism, and they seem so adamant about it, like dear old Otangelo in there. The poor little schnook needs to figure out what the hell's going on with the double bottlenecks of creationism. And if he wanted to do that, fine and dandy, but they don't think to do that because you've got your Adam and Eve bottleneck where all the original kinds were made, and all of the fossil record that we see had to have originated from those created kinds and then are destroyed in the flood. So you got one mass of stuff that's producing stegosaurs and therapsids and all these other little things. And then whatever those original kinds were, and remember, all the kinds had to be made just once in the original creation week. Those kinds then are taken on board the ark, and then they come off the ark and lickety-split proliferate into a totally different set of species that are very unlike what was previous to the flood. And the creationists haven't quite figured out why that's the case. Why don't we get a world that's still got therapsids and pterosaurs instead of hummingbirds and all the rest?
Well, and actually pushes back glasses. We do still have a world full of therapsids, RJ.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
But more importantly, the point I ridiculously researched to do for my opening statement, how were they all not killed when several million asteroids would have impacted Earth all at once?
Like, they don't realize that all of those, that's another factor, is that by and large creationists don't think about that. That they don't, one of the major things of my TIP project has been spotting the things they don't think about. That yes, we know creationists say a lot of stupid things about the things they do think about, but the vast majority of their problems come from their omissions, not their commission errors. And so I've been tracking my master spreadsheet of what technical points are brought up. One area of the reason why I wrote the Evolution Slam Dunk book was the fact that the reptile mammal transition was relatively little mentioned in the evolutionary literature, and so got practically no coverage at all secondarily in the creationist literature. So it just got left off the cutting room floor when it was such a spectacular example. There's only like about 20 anti-evolutionists in the entire bit who have brought things out, and as Dapper Dino knows, there are some people who decided to weigh in on that subject, like Raw Matt, recently, and not showing themselves very well. Summarize what you had seen with Raw Matt for us while I take a swing.
Oh my goodness. So my most recent interaction involving Raw Matt.
Uncooked Matthew.
Yes, Uncooked Matthew.
I love that part.
Centered primarily around Probainognathus. So Raw Matt was gonna, take down the evolutionary story of reptile mammal. Yeah, you in particular. So he goes on this whole rant during which he gets almost everything wrong that you could possibly get wrong about the cladistics involving
the molars.
Yeah, so the greatest thing, though, is when he says that Probainognathus didn't even have molars. How could it be an ancestor to mammals? But he has pictures up of a Probainognathus jaw prominently displaying, in his article, prominently displaying the molars. In fact, there's even a close-up of the molars. And it's just like, how can you possibly be this incompetent? I don't understand it.
But it's Raw Matt.
Well, yeah, I mean that is the answer. You can be that incompetent because this is a guy who seriously considered whether or not breathing was optional.
So one of the things
not breathing, eating.
Well, he thought you could breathe instead of eat. That's what it was.
Right, exactly. Yeah, he seriously considered maybe I don't need to ever eat. I can just breathe. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, very important point that you have to sit in the sun a lot.
Oh, okay.
Raw Matt is photosynthetic.
I'm sunburned and breathing. That's good enough for me.
Yep,
there we go.
What it means to be alive.
But so in any area, it's to figure out what they're leaving out. And one of the areas that really stands out like a sore thumb and is going to be covered in some detail in the Volume 2 book of Oxford Air relates to the cognitive literature, brain chemistry, systems about language, relating. That is an almost completely invisible subject in anti-evolutionism. That even when you get to the semi-technical, when people will try to bring up the issue of consciousness and language and all of that, they're really missing most of that material. And none of them, by the way, are workers in the field on it. And so what's really funky are ones where you do have people like Jason Lyle, who has an actual astronomy degree. He's PhD in it. and yet you're looking at how exactly are you thinking about shuffleboarding everything around to still maintain? It's a different thing when you got somebody like Kent Hovind, Robert Gentry, who decided that he figured out where in the universe the throne of God was.
Wait, I have to know, where is it?
Oh, I think it's in the constellation Vega or somewhere. He worked that out.
Okay.
He was very specific about that. Wink, wink.
No. Wait, it's not centered around Kolob?
No, apparently not. Yeah, yeah.
Darn it.
Now, and Robert Gentry's. Are you familiar much, Maddie, with Robert Gentry?
I'm not.
He's the polonium halo guy.
I have yet to read anything about polonium halos.
Oh, lucky
makes
you!
Any type of sense to me?
Yeah,
it just feels like nonsense.
It's one of the
wouldn't you know?
Things. It's one of the persistent features of creationism. It goes way back to the Duane Gish era in the 70s and 80s. Robert Gentry was actually making these arguments initially back in the 1960s, published in Science magazine, by the way. I mean, he was published in actual science journals. And pretty soon they started noticing that he's kind of weird. And so he stopped publishing in Science magazine. But anyway, the various decay chains produce little halos of radiation around them. So they'll form little concentric rings. And what they have in some spots are polonium halos without the connecting halos of the original pieces. Now, these things tend to occur like in mica and various other things. And if you look at the decay chain of uranium, you hit radon permeable gas from which polonium occurs. That maybe, could it be that the permeable gas radon is breaking away from the uranium and forming its own little node that produces the polonium halo? Is that not possible?
That sounds pretty possible. Hey, I'm so sorry. I'm going to pause you really fast. According to chat, it doesn't look like the link you've been referencing is available in the description. So my bad. I put the description in after the show is posted. Okay. So all of that stuff, I haven't put any of that material in, but when the show is done and it's all been finalized, then I go right back and then I'll put in all the things. The previous episodes all have that in there. I put the links to the books and to the website and where you can go to Patreon, hint, hint, and the GoFundMe and all that other stuff in there, right up in there in the link. So it's in every single bloody video. I will say that, so yeah. Okay, cool. Sorry, Heat Shield in your chat, he's been trying to do you a solid, but he can't post the link in chat. So.
And if that's the other feature that's been frustrating, and I haven't figured out yet how to do this properly, to where I can give somebody a bloody wrench, which I can do on YouTube, but not in this mode here. There's no menu, even when the chat's running, for me to be able to give somebody a wrench. I was going to give Stern Cardinale a wrench when he was in there a while back.
Yeah.
So I plead extenuating patheticness from running off of this particular platform where I'm kind of behind the curve on it. But anyway, once the video is finalized, I do put the links in there. And then that www.tortucan.wordpress.com that's in my opening logo, that's the website, and you can find all the stuff in it that way. So you can hunt around for me. All you kids on the media, the YouTube and the interweb, can figure out by the Google how to locate where I'm at on the media.
Yeah. I feel like you just went full, is that Steve Buscemi, that meme of the hello fellow youths?
Yes.
I'm old enough to remember rabbit ears on my television set and all that. So that's an ancient world. And I figured that given the extent of the technologies, I'm doing pretty damn good for an old fart here. I'm still pulling the off.
If it makes you feel any better, I'm currently on a quest to acquire my great-great-grandmother's treadle Singer sewing machine.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah.
I have my mom's old electric Singer from like 1940 something or other that is still down in the basement and all that. But yeah, one with the treadles and all of that goes even farther back. Did you know that Mr. Singer had a torrid love affair with Isadora Duncan back in the early 20th century?
Ooh, I didn't. That sounds way
if
too
you ever want to see it,
there's
a wonderful film that was made around 1970. We're about to go digression geek alert here. Vanessa Redgrave played Isadora Duncan. and it's called Isadora. And it's a kind of a quirky little artsy film, but it's very effective. And so if you can catch it sometime,
Nice.
Vanessa Redgrave playing Isadora Duncan. That the other joke about Isadora Duncan, supposedly at one point she said to Bernard Shaw that they should get married, and she would say, "Imagine with my beauty and your brains." And Bernard Shaw reportedly told her, "Ah, my dear, but it might just as well be the other way around."
Ooh, for all you gents in the chat there. That's actually a solid pickup line.
Oh, I love the good snark thing. There's a bunch of those. Wilson Meisner, who was a wit, who was he was known. It's once said of somebody that he was so cheap he had rubber lined pockets so he could steal soup.
Mm-hmm.
And his brother Addison Meisner was I think a society architect and did a whole bunch of stuff down in Florida right before the time of the hurricane that came through there in the 1920s, which ironically destroyed the big mansion retirement house that William Jennings Bryan had bought. But he died in the Scopes trial before he had a chance to move down there. So inheriting the wind, he didn't have to worry about because he was before the hurricane. Anyway, Harry Thaw, who is the guy that tried to shoot or successfully shot the architect Stanford White back in the turn of the century, and had gone into the loony bin. That was one of the first insanity defenses, and he was let out on parole years later, and he went down to Florida, and he was seeing all of these houses and stuff that Meisner and that was built. He says, "My God, I shot the wrong architect."
Happens to the best of us.
Do you want to know my favorite fact about polonium?
Mm-hmm. It has something to do with Marie Curie, right?
Yeah, polonium was the first element that she discovered, and she and her husband Pierre Curie discovered radium as joint work, but polonium is sort of her discovery, and then it is named for her home country of Poland.
Yeah. The
not Romania.
Not Romania. No,
okay,
no.
Right.
Which
I was almost confused on that one.
Which Romania always sticks out because it is linguistically in the Latin linguistic family, and it's variously spelled with or without a U in the Romanian part, but it's not a Slavic group. I'm sure Dapper is sitting on marking down. Okay, let's make sure that's an accurate thing.
Yeah, so Romanian is the only surviving Eastern Romance language. There were others, but it's the only one that survives. It's also notable for being the only country that is traditionally Eastern Orthodox that speaks Romanian language, while Poland is the only country with a majority Slavic language that is traditionally Roman Catholic.
Yeah,
cool.
History's like weird.
Yeah,
RJ, if you get canceled by Dapper, it's okay because he canceled me yesterday. So
that's true. Dapper was just in cancellation mode when you were giving out your listings of all the different aquatic creatures.
I didn't even mention it, but you forgot Desmostylians too.
Well, there.
Yeah, actually, no. Nestlig beat you to that one. He told me that earlier. Look, it was a comprehensive list. I wasn't going for every animal that's gone back to the sea.
What it does remind of, there was oh gosh, I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Vermeij. He's a blind paleontologist, which is a remarkable phenomenon to deal with.
That's pretty great.
Yeah, and anyway, he had written a book quite a few years ago, and he's still active. He still does stuff. But he did a very perceptive work on issuing about the notion of niche invasions, and the idea that when you look at like marine reptiles and others that invade the aquatic realm and others, if the place is already occupied, it's harder to do that. And so this relates to the role that what niches bats develop versus birds, or what niches birds develop versus pterosaurs, or what niches that the various. What surprises me about that Mesozoic is how many marine reptiles got in there, although most of them made their mark in the Triassic. So you have the ichthyosaurs and the plesiosaurs and turtles and all the rest are getting in their little feet in the water in that early period. And then things are a little bit tougher to deal with later on. And of course, when the mass extinction occurred, and it just swept clean all of those marine reptiles, and now you had a lot of fish and some occasional sharks, and suddenly a new group of funky little shore-wading artiodactyls that could hold their breath really well, because that's what those little critters could do, eventually end up as the cetaceans. And
we went all the way to the very. I thought you meant the Jurassic extinction. You jumped all the way to the KPG. I was like,
million years ago. That's what
I heard
happens.
artiodactyl, and I went, wait, what?
yeah. I've left out some connecting steps.
That's all right. Yeah. That's
just
okay.
fill in the blank from 200 million years ago down to 50 million years ago. It's 150 million years of asterisks. Don't bother that.
It's okay.
But yeah, that brings up the whole notions about how niche invasion occurs and niche partitioning, and what kind of hurdles face them, and how different mutations work in different contexts. But we do know that the cetaceans, once they got their little flipper in the thing, expand radically. It's one of the reasons why some of the giant megalodon-style sharks have a field day as they start adapting to eating on very large cetaceans that are now entering the fray. And so you've got this interesting ecological web that's going on, plus the fact that this is all taking place in the Tethys Sea that's shrinking as India is about ready to slam into the Asian subcontinent, throwing up the Himalayas, and no more ocean. And that's why all of those pachycetids and all that are found in Pakistan, way up in the plateau, having been squashed up there along with all of those open clams, aka brachiopods.
So,
yeah.
I'm just going to throw my one random fun fact about megalodons. Back when I was in the Navy, I had a buddy that would he would scuba dive in the lake right off the coast of Charleston, and you could find like the teeth, right?
Yeah.
And because we're nuclear nerds, we 100% brought them into the rad health office, and you could measure how radioactive they were because they've incorporated uranium and all that fun stuff.
Nice.
That was super fun until we made the rad health officer
And I think megalodons are only known from their teeth. I don't think they've ever found, because it's cartilaginous fish don't have a really good skeletal record anyway. So so they see this honking large tooth that if you extrapolate the size of how big the critter would be based upon the tooth, you get a very big critter.
Yeah. And most importantly, their tooth is radioactive.
I also have a fun fact about Megalodon. They are definitely extinct. Thank you for your time.
Definitely, absolutely, positively.
I don't know. I watched this movie with Rainn Wilson, and
you best not finish that sentence, Dapper.
Extinct. They just live underneath the bottom of the Mariana Trench.
No.
No?
Well,
and
let's remember those documentaries. Those multiple
Dapper,
documentaries on the
done.
Sharknadoes.
Yes.
Oh yes. Well, that's what I'm waiting for is Megalo Sharknado.
Can we
make that movie though?
Mothra?
Right?
What was that noise?
That was me very excited and clapping. It's fine.
Okay.
I'm excited.
You're too old to remember much of the SCTV TV series that was out in Canada, although you probably recognize most of the cast members because they're still knocking around and on Saturday Night Live and various other contexts. But anyway, one of my favorite episodes of that was they would do a periodic parody of 3D movies, and it was horror mystery chiller horror theater, and it was the cheesiest little thing. Well, one of the titles was Dr. Tongue and the 3D House of Stewardesses. And of course, would you like some canapes? And they would do the 3D effect.
Excellent.
And the other one they did one that was equally a scream was that by accident they had gotten the wrong film, and the title was Night of the Wolf, and the poor guy doesn't realize that it's actually an Ingmar Bergman movie. So here is this thing he's trying to pass off. Oh, this is a scary one, kids. And it's the Swedish movie where people are staring at each other with ticking clocks and going, all in black and white. It's great. If you could ever chance to see the old SCTV shows from they're way back in the 1970s, and that some of them may or may not be on YouTube. But anyway, it's in that same thing with Monty Python and the that series, and they're totally irreverent. Oh gosh, God, I can suddenly not think of anybody. Almost all of them are still terribly active in comedy. But they did a thing with a version of My Fair Lady with this Perini Sclerosa, who is this like Italian charwoman who does not speak a word of English, and she suddenly pulled in to this version of My Fair Lady, and so there's going, the rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain, and she turns and says, "Oh, the songs of and has no idea what the hell's going on." And they
Seems like the best way to watch My Fair Lady.
Yeah. Well, it's the longest, one of the longest musicals. It's 3 hours long, which is really big for a musical. I think Oliver and My Fair Lady are the two giant ones. Oh, I'm about ready. Geek alert! He's going musicals. Okay, I'm sorry.
Doesn't Les Mis hits that length, right?
Yeah. And that one feels like it's 3 hours long.
Oof. I like Les Mis. I thought it was fun.
I actually did too. The version that was done recently on PBS was really quite good, as well as the dramatic version, Les Miserables, that was done right around the same time. Both of them are really quite excellent. And it's a ripping good yarn, and it's something that I think the reason why it's very popular to this day is it's very resonant for our times. It's all about, are you a criminal because of your environment or the circumstances? Can you get shunted into things where you're now treated as a criminal even though you aren't? Is there a repentance myth? And the idea of the policeman is going after this guy, even though he's reformed himself and turned into a virtual saint, and he's still trying to get him for that dollar, whatever franc, a piece of bread that he stole when he was younger. And that it's just...
that's definitely not relevant today.
Yeah, I can't think of any connection.
No.
Yeah, and so that's why that whole period of the 1840s, a lot of the issues that we're still dealing with today were ones that were cutting edge social environment issues of 150 years ago, because they had just the same problems about entrenched aristocracies and privileged, the role of wealth, and that you find the same issues popping up in Charles Dickens stories, Oliver Twist, along with his anti-Semitism, which comes in from a different direction. So we've got lots of stuff. All this old shit can matter. You can learn from it.
And on that note, I actually think I've got to bail.
Oh, bye, man.
Yeah, we're past the hour anyway. I will say that I'm going to be on Lamont's chat on Saturday talking about the history of impeachments, presidential impeachments, since I am actually a historian, although you would never know it. So I'm actually doing. But so many people aren't really all that aware of Andrew Jeanson and all that kind of context, and so I'm going to fill them in on that, and it should be a delightful.
Are you going to have a slideshow, RJ?
No.
Ooh,
you and your fancy PowerPoints. Well, thank you, Eddie, for showing up. That was a delightful day. The climate issue and paleoclimate stuff. Boy, we should have a whole show on that. It'd be delightful to have a discussion with her on it, because that's there are two areas that creationists are going to look even stupider on in the next generations. One of which involves that whole paleoclimate thing, as they get farther and farther behind, because their cartoon is never going to get more detailed than what we already see with Ariel Roth or Sanford, and they're never going to make any improvements on it. The other is the really cutting edge revolution that's taking place in deep magma mapping today, to where they're able to image three-dimensionally these subduction slabs and what happens to them way down in they were just thinking, they're kind of a blob. No, they're actually crumpling up and making very complex structures that's interacting with what's happening up above. And it's the reason why stuff is doing what it does on the surface, because of what's happening down below. And they managed to map areas with North America where ancient subduction flows that were taking place out off the coast of the old North America 300 million years ago have been crumpled up and subducted and shifted and are now underneath New York City because the Northern American plate has moved over it. They've also been doing this down in the, I think, in the New Zealand, Australia area. They've been doing a lot of that thing. And eventually they'll have the whole bloody planet mapped with this kind of stuff. And this is going to be yet more paleo plate movement to where they can infer what was going on when the blobs weren't blobs, but were in fact subduction zones. And so it will allow them to identify, in some cases, now completely obliterated subduction events that have, because the seafloor has spread over and gotten and overmapped itself, but the blobs are still there down below. So there's going to be a lot more work, and this will be something to compare to Tim Clary and the mega sequence crowd and all that crap that goes on in there. So since I've not been able to see the chat in any respect whatsoever with any outstanding questions or issues or comments or anything that you can see from
the channel that you're going to give the impeachments on is Vandalia 1998.
Yeah,
that RJ's going to give his talk on.
Yeah, and that should be. He asked me about that because there's an awful lot of people that would not directly know, other than just what they were reading about in the history book, even the Clinton one that's like 30 years ago. And Nixon goes even farther back. And then, of course, Andrew Johnson from the 1860s is just a little bit beyond my wheelhouse there. But nevertheless, it's an area that relates into the Civil War period about which that I'm not trivially informed. And so it's a really interesting thing and relates to all of the impeachments will relate to the issues of technicalities and pressing your luck and going after somebody for political reasons, for the right reasons or the wrong reasons. And so there's layers and layers of stuff that's going on there. So I think it'll be a very interesting discussion. And you'll learn a little bit of shit about Andrew Johnson and the various stuff and the Tenure of Office Act. So I think that pretty much covers it for the day. I will be ending the stream. You have anything last to say, Dapper or Jackson?
Speaking of Oliver Twist, Google is actually not that bad. Go give it a try.
Oh, I'll take your word for it. Can you get it? Can you get it in freeze-dried packets?
I mean, it's basically boiled wheat, so it already comes freeze-dried if you just buy wheat, or well, not wheat, sorry, flour. So just buy flour, and you already have dried gruel.
There you go. Just pour some fluid into a bucket of flour.
You're just boiling me. You know what? I don't agree with this.
Yeah, basically, so gruel is just wheat flour porridge. That's literally what it is. Well, I mean, you say that, but other people might say bleh to oat porridge, which is what oat is.
And I don't like oat porridge either. So there you go.
I happen to like oat and wheat.
Well, then you can have all of my gruel. You can even have some more, Dapper.
I made gruel for myself 2 days ago.
Dapo Diner.
Okay, so on that note that we now know that Dapper Dino is a gruel addict, we will now let it go and we will all see you kids. Everybody stay safe. I had a Johnson & Johnson shot before any concerns about it. So if I suddenly grow a third arm or turn into a pumpkin or something in the next 3 weeks, that'll be it. But so far, there doesn't seem to be any side effects on that. So the odds are against it. But anyway, everybody who hasn't been vaccinated, get vaccinated. Stay safe, wear masks. Avoid being foolish, like so many people that we have discussed in previous things have done. And let's get through this so we can get back to kind of normal and talk about gruel with that. Okay.
All right.
Indeed.
Okay. Bye, kids.